Alright, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Barberini and God Bible Study. So, last time we covered the Book of Lamentations in the first parts of our Bible study series that we started off. So, moving on, we're going to move into the Book of Ezekiel, talk about it, and we're in this first video, we're going to go over the first 3 chapters. So with that being said, let's just get straight into it. So, the book takes place in Babylon after Ezekiel, who was set to be a priest in Jerusalem, has now been exiled. So, the book opens up with Ezekiel sitting on the bank of the Kibar River in Babylon on the day of his 30th birthday, when he received his first vision from the Lord. In verse 4-5, he says, "I looked, and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lights and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures." So the 4 creatures that Ezekiel was looking at here was cherubim. Now, if you didn't know, in the Bible, cherubim are powerful, fearsome, celestial beings that serve as guardians of God's holiness, his throne, and sacred spaces like the Garden of Eden. So, Ezekiel is sitting here on the riverbank seeing these 4 creatures, which he describes them in verse 6, chapter 1. He says, "Their form was human, but each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings." So, later in chapter 1, the cherubim move out of the way and he sees something else above them. In verses 25-28, he says, "Then there came a voice from above the vault over their heads as they stood with lowered wings. Above the vault over their heads was what looked like a throne of lapis lazuli, and high above on the throne was a figure like that of a man. I saw that from what appeared to be his waist up, he looked like glowing metal as if full of fire, and that from there down he looked like fire, and brilliant light surrounded him, like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds on a rainy day, so was the radiance around him." So right there, Ezekiel is quite literally seeing God like coming out of the sky to get his attention. And that pretty much sums up chapter 1. Chapter 1 is just Ezekiel's inaugural vision, the first time that God is getting his attention. So, moving on to chapter 2. And in the Bible that I read, it's the NIV translation. So the passage, like chapter 2, is like a title, and it's Ezekiel's call to be a prophet. So the chapter opens up in verse 1 with God speaking directly to Ezekiel, saying, "Son of man, stand up on your feet, and I will speak to you." Now, when God calls Ezekiel son of man here, it's kind of different than how Jesus calls himself the Son of Man in the New Testament. When God calls Ezekiel son of man here, he is just showing that he is still in control, he is holy, and that Ezekiel is still merely human and one of his children. He's just receiving visions from heaven. Which is also an important reminder for us to know that God is still in control, and he is still holy, and he is still watching over us every single day to keep us safe. So chapter 2 continues with God commissioning Ezekiel to go to Israel. Chapter 2 verses 3-5, it says, "Son of man, I am sending you to the Israelites, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been in revolt against me to this very day. The people to whom I am sending you are obstinate and stubborn. Say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. And whether they fail to listen, for they are a rebellious people, they will know that a prophet has been among them." So those 3 verses are God telling Ezekiel what he is meant to do and turning him into a prophet of the Lord. So in verses 6-8, God continues to say to him, "And you, son of man, do not be afraid of them or their words. Do not be afraid. Though briars and thorns are all around you, and you live among scorpions, do not be afraid of what they say or be terrified by them. Though they are rebellious people, you must speak my words to them whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are rebellious. But you, son of man, listen to what I say to you. Do not rebel like that rebellious people. Open your mouth and eat what I give you." So, for a second, we're going to focus on that first part of verse 6 there, where God tells him to do not be afraid twice. He tells him that twice in like the matter of like 5 seconds. So a quick side note, the phrase "do not be afraid" is repeated over 365 times in the Bible. So when God tells us do not be afraid, he means it. He watches over you every single day, and he won't let harm be done to you. And that is exactly what he is telling Ezekiel here, is that when he goes into this land of rebellious people, don't be scared, because he will protect you. So we live in a crazy world these days, but no matter what is going on, there is still a God in heaven who loves his children here on earth. And if you find yourself in trouble, all you gotta do is look up towards him and say, "God, keep me safe," and he will do just that. The Bible also says, "He who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved," and that doesn't mean just saved to go to heaven. That means every kind of saved from addiction, saved from an abusive relationship, saved from a house fire, saved from cancer. It doesn't matter what it is, God will save you from it. So when Ezekiel was being sent to this land full of people who have turned against God, he didn't worry. He knew that God would keep him safe. So fast forwarding on to the end of verse 8, God tells Ezekiel to eat what he gives him. And in chapter 2, verse 9 through 10, it says, "Then I looked and saw a hand stretched out to me, and it was a scroll which he unrolled before me. On both sides of it were written words of lament and mourning and woe." So chapter 2 ends there. And let's talk about the scroll for a second. So it doesn't like really tell us like what the scroll is about, but we know, like, we gotta use our context clues. He's fixing to go into Israel, and God is giving him this scroll of lament and mourning and woe, which basically later on in Ezekiel, we're going to see God sending Ezekiel into Israel and telling him exactly what to say, which is how being a prophet worked back then. And he's going to say these words on the scroll to him that basically, if the people of Israel don't quit turning away from God, that he's just going to wipe them all out, which is exactly what he did to Jerusalem. The book before this in Lamentations. So the first few verses of chapter 3 are simply God once again telling Ezekiel to go and do this, what I'm telling you to do. So fast forward a little bit to chapter 3, verses 14 through 15. It says, "The Spirit then lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness and in the anger of my spirit, with the strong hand of the Lord on me. I came to the exiles who lived at Tel Aviv near the Kibar River, and there, where they were living, I sat among them for 7 days, deeply distressed." So let's focus on the first part of the verse where it says, "He went in bitterness and in the anger of his spirit." Ezekiel was bitter with God for sending him to Israel. He was angry in his own spirit that he sat by the river for 7 days distressed because he didn't know what to do. And we can also, look at that in today's world. When God tells us to do something, sometimes we're a little bit hesitant to go and do it because we don't know what it holds. But that's where him telling us to not be afraid comes into play, because if he's sending us to do something, then he knows that it's going to play out for your benefit, because he will never, ever send you to do something that will harm you. So moving on down to verse 17 in chapter 3. It says, "The word of the Lord came to Ezekiel at the end of the 7 days, and he said, 'Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the people of Israel. So hear the word I speak and give them warning from me.'" So basically what was happening here is that God was making it to where Ezekiel had to tell the people to turn from their evil ways or they would die for their sins. Now, he pretty much gave Ezekiel an ultimatum here. If Ezekiel was to refuse God, God told him that if he did not warn them, then the blood would be on his hands. So God puts Ezekiel into a position where he can do what God is telling him to do and not have those deaths on his hands. Or he can refuse God, but everyone who dies because of their sins, those deaths are now on the hands of Ezekiel. So moving on towards the end of chapter 3, verses 24 through 27, it says, Then the Spirit came into me and raised me to my feet. He spoke to me and said, Go shut yourself inside your house, and you, son of man, they will tie with ropes. You will be bound so that you cannot go out among the people. I will make your tongue stick to the roof of your mouth, so that you will be silent and unable to rebuke them, for they are rebellious people. But when I speak to you, I will open your mouth, and you shall say to them, This is what the sovereign Lord says. Whoever will listen, let them listen, and whoever will refuse, let them refuse, for they are rebellious people. So let's focus on that part right there where God says he will make Ezekiel unable to speak while he is tied up. He does this to build patience, because in his human spirit, once he gets tied up, obviously he's going to get angry and he might want to yell at the people, but that's not what God wants. Instead, he keeps him quiet until it's time for the Spirit of God to come upon him and tells him exactly what to say. Which basically at the end of chapter 3 sums up that God is preparing him to deliver the message, which he will later on do that in the rest of the book. And that's how chapter 3 ends. So if you were to take away anything for the first 3 chapters, it's that there was a big responsibility with delivering God's message to his people. There's a burden, and Ezekiel faced that when he went to Israel. He sat by the river for 7 days, distressed. He was angry. He was bitter. He didn't know what to do. And the first 3 chapters reminds us also of the holiness and seriousness of God's calling in our lives today. So, with that being said, I don't have anything else. I hope you guys learned something today. And if you feel like I could have done a better job or I might have missed something, just feel free to leave a comment. But with that being said, I will see you guys next time. One more thing before I got off here. I might be starting another job next week where I'll work mornings. I don't know yet have to see if I get the job, but if I do, I don't know when I'll do the podcast. We'll still try to do it. But yeah, that's all I got. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and always remember that Jesus loves you. Peace.